And now let's hear from Dr. Linda Espinosa as she reviews what we know about young dual language learners, why it's so important to provide strategic support, and to learn about some of the current program approaches for fostering language development. Linda?
All right, now we're going to take a look at the policy brief that you've all been discussing in your small groups, pre-K third, challenging common myths about dual language learners, and review what the current research that we have that either supports these myths or does not support the myths. And I have to say that policy brief was written in 2013. So as educators, I think many of us have moved beyond some of the information that's provided in the policy brief, and we're much better informed now than we were in 2013. And so we've kept up with the recent research. However, there are many in our communities and in our families that may still believe and hold on to some of these myths that may be interfering with their ability to truly embrace bilingual education during the early childhood years. So I think that the more that we know, the more in-depth information we have about why these myths can or cannot be supported, I think will help us to be better communicators with our families so that we will have a consensus about what is truly in the best interests of dual language learners, short-term and long-term. Okay, so let's get started. True or false? Learning two languages during the early childhood years will overwhelm, confuse, or delay acquisition of English. One of the most significant research findings in the last 10 years is just how capable babies are in learning languages. One of my colleagues actually likes to tell me that babies are better language learners than I will ever be. In fact, they are linguistic geniuses. So get used to it, Linda. People used to think that since learning language was such a monumental task during the early childhood years, so much mental energy is devoted to learning a language during that birth to 5 years, that learning one or more than one language was really too much to ask, particularly for certain groups of children. I remember going to federal policy meetings, and sometimes federal government representatives would say, you know, the burden of learning a second language, implying that this was really an additional and extremely difficult task for young children. And I think what they're really remembering is their high school years and trying to learn a second language. They're really not very reflective of what the baby brain is capable of doing. Now, many cognitive scientists say the human brain is in fact wired to learn language. In fact, 1, 2, 3, or even 4 more languages, the baby brain is enormously receptive and capable of processing and learning from the sounds, the rhythms, the grammar, the inflection points of any language that they're exposed to. So this capacity to acquire multiple languages with sufficient amount and quality of input. And it doesn't matter their racial background, their ethnic background, their socioeconomic status. It doesn't matter if children have special needs. In fact, all children are capable of and benefit from being exposed to more than one languages. In fact, it does enhance the neural capacity and the neural density in the brain in ways other than just learning language. So it's an academic, linguistic, and social advantage that we've really come to understand, I would say, in the last 10 years or so. The next myth, true or false? The language development of dual language learners looks the same as monolingual language development. There are some features of dual language learning during the early years that look different between dual language learners and monolingual learners. And some of these differences may be mistaken for language delays, when in fact they are normal aspects of acquiring two languages during the early childhood years. For instance, dual language learners often know fewer words in each of their languages than a monolingual child. However, this is almost always a function of the amount of exposure that a child has had to each language. They may be exposed to some words in their home language and other words in English. For instance, they might know common words like kitchen, spoon, sheets, etc. in their home language and not know those words in English, whereas they may know recess, blackboard, chalk, etc. in English and not know those words in their home language. However, if you combine the number of words across the two different languages, you'll almost always see comparable language knowledge. Another example of where dual language learners differ from monolinguals is the speed of word retrieval. DLLs are slower on average because they are processing language requests in two different language pathways, which takes longer. So when you give a dual language learner a prompt in English and their native language is Spanish, you can almost see, we actually have video examples where we can almost see that child processing the language. What is it the teacher is asking me? They go through several linguistic interpretations, if you will, between languages to come to here is what the teacher wants me to respond to, and here is the language that I need to respond in. Now, this may take longer, but it doesn't indicate any kind of a language delay. So I think the use of timed language tests needs to be seriously reconsidered for dual language learners. Okay, true or false? Total English immersion from pre-K through third grade is the best way for a young dual language learner to acquire English. This one makes sense from a logical point of view. All K-12 literature basically tells us that the more time you spend in a subject matter, for instance, math, if you spend more time on task on math, children will have higher math achievement scores. So there is some logic to holding this belief. However, for language learning actually works in a different way. So I like to call it counterintuitive. If you don't continue to support the development of a child's home language, that child's acquisition of English will be impeded. So that first language lays the foundation. It develops many of the skills a child is going to need to acquire a second language and to have high proficiency in any language, like the understanding of words are formed by individual sounds, and sounds map onto symbols. In other words, phonological awareness. That awareness first happens in a child's first language. And most often, especially if their first language is a phonetic language, they will be able to transfer those skills to the acquisition of English. Total immersion in a new language will result in losing the skills in the home language. So I like to think of it as you kind of cut them off at the knees in trying to acquire a second language, when so much underneath language is common across different languages. So those home language skills that are being developed are so necessary to full proficiency in a second language. So total immersion does not promote higher levels of English proficiency and results in losses in the first language, which eventually contributes to lower achievement in English language proficiency. So I think of that as a counterintuitive finding, but one so important for the birth to 5 years. True or false? Because schools don't have the capacity to provide instruction in all the languages represented by dual language children, programs should provide instruction in one common language or English. So I think of this as kind of English is the default language. Because we don't have enough qualified bilingual educators, we must use one common language, English, that we all know how to speak. It is often an all or nothing mindset. We can't possibly instruct in all the languages our children and families represent. And many of our future requirements are in English. So our task is to introduce these children to English and stay in English, since that is the language we will all be using eventually. People think, well, I have 12 language groups and I only have monolingual English speakers, and 2 of my staff also speak Spanish. So we can't do a full bilingual program. So we must have to do an English program because we can't address all of those language needs. In fact, that is why we created POLE, or Personalized Oral Language Learning, since it's a set of strategies that all early childhood teachers can learn and implement that will support all language groups. So it's not true that we either do all bilingual ed or we do all English. In fact, no matter what the language diversity in your preschool programs are and what the language capacities of your teachers and staff are, we can still respond to and attend to and promote the development of all those languages. And that's what POLE was intended to achieve. True or false? Spanish-speaking Latinos show social as well as academic delays when entering kindergarten. I think most of us know from our personal experiences in our classrooms that this simply is not true. But it has been clearly documented in several very large-scale studies that examined the social competencies of Spanish-speaking children from low-income families who had recently immigrated to the United States. When kindergarten teachers rated these children, these dual language learners, on their social and emotional competencies, they found real strengths in the areas of self-regulation, the children's ability to manage and control their emotions, and their interpersonal skills, how well they related to both the teacher and their peers, and low rates of aggression and acting out behaviors. In fact, they were rated more highly than many of their monolingual peers. Unfortunately, those social emotional advantages disappeared by 3rd grade with this group of children. So many DLLs have social emotional strengths that need to be recognized and fostered and reinforced. And families need to be valued for their parenting strengths because clearly the social emotional competencies of these children reflect something positive that is going on in the home, and we need to find out more about that and support those parenting strengths leading to social emotional competencies. True or false? Native English speakers may experience academic and language delays in dual language programs. So many English-speaking families experience some concern that their child might be adversely affected by learning in 2 languages early on, especially when so many tests, so many high-stakes tests are given in English only. There's the fear that their child might be losing ground and might jeopardize their chances in subject matter areas in their later years academically. Again, this is exactly opposite of what the research tells us. All children, both dual language learners and native English speakers, benefit from learning more than one language. These are the students who have the highest academic achievement across subject matters, science, math, literacy, etc., are more likely to graduate from high school and also are more likely to be successful in 4-year colleges. So if you truly believe everything that we've been talking about today, then we know that it's not just dual language learners who benefit from dual language programs. Actually, native English speakers benefit in the same areas as well. True or false? If the instruction in your program is delivered primarily in English, you do not need to worry about DLL children's progress in their home language. And this particular belief has a real practical challenge to all levels of bilingual education. If we truly believe that a child's first language is the foundation of all future learning, then we must assess the child's progress in both languages for a complete profile of the child's development and growth and educational needs. And I do believe, having taught these courses for many years, that what we teach is what we assess. So if we don't regularly document progress in a child's home language, we probably won't attend to its development as much as we need to in order to advance it. But there is a real practical challenge to accomplishing this goal. We will be discussing some methods that all early childhood educators can use to assess young children both in English and in their home language. But I don't deny the realities and the challenges, but that doesn't mean we give up the goal. If we truly believe it's important, then we must assess in both languages.